Through the story The Last Lesson, the writer Alphonse Daudet emphasizes on the central theme of linguistic chauvinism. Linguistic chauvinism means the superiority of the language of the ruling class people. Alphonse questions the enforced or compulsion of supremacy over the ruling classes and their impose on their own culture and identity on the inferior classes. The story begins with little Franz running to school. He was getting late and he hated to be scolded by the teacher M. Hamel. M. Hamel had told them that he would be asking questions on participle that very day, and little Franz had no knowledge or did not know a thing about participle. So for a moment he thought he wanted to run away because it was a warm and bright day. The birds were chirping in the wood, and in the open field, the Prussian soldiers were drilling, exercising and march past. Of course, to sit and watch them and to wander around would be more fun to do than be asked questions about participle and be scolded inside a classroom. It was so tempting, but he made up his mind to go to school. As he passed his way across the town hall, he saw a crowd in front of the bulletin of the town hall on the board, and Franz remembered that all the bad news would come from that bulletin board and was thinking, what bad news could it be again? But he did not stop to ask or look at the board himself. Even the blacksmith watcher called him, saying, "Slow down, boy, you will reach school in plenty of time." He was thinking that when the class starts, the children would be noisy, and the sounds of the opening and closing of their books and the desk, and the students reading their lessons in unison, and the sound of the teacher's stick rapping on the table. And with all this commotion, he would reach his seat unnoticed. But it was unusually quiet that day. Through the window, he could see that everyone was quietly seated, and M. Hamel was walking around the classroom. Luckily, M. Hamel did not scold him, but told him kindly to go and take his seat, and that they were starting the class without him. After sitting down, he realized that M. Hamel wore his beautiful green coat and frilled shirt and his little silk cap, which he wore only on special occasions. The whole school seemed so strange and formal. Even the last bench, which used to be usually empty, was now filled up with the villagers, the old hosier, the former mayor, the former postmaster, and several others. Everybody looked sad, as Franz was still wondering what was going on. M. Hamel said that this was his last lesson that he would give. After the defeat of French at the hands of the Prussians, order had come from Berlin to teach only German in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine. This was the last French lesson, and a new German teacher would start to teach from the next day onwards. At first, Franz felt happy to hear these words because he never could learn French. He realized that that was the news written on the town hall notice board. But at the same time, he also felt sad that he would never be able to learn French. The book that he hated carrying to school every day now seemed like an old friend and not easy to depart with. The fact that he was not going to see M. Hamel anymore made him feel sorry for him and forget about his cranky nature, and he also forgot about how he would always keep beating him with his ruler. Now he understood that it was in honor of his last lesson that he had put on his fine Sunday clothes, and the villagers had come to see him. It was their way of appreciating M. Hamel for his 40 years of service to the community. While little Franz was contemplating about all this, the teacher called out his name to recite the participle, and how he wished he could recite it loudly and clearly to please M. Hamel and not to disappoint him, but he could not. M. Hamel did not scold Franz, but simply said that every day we tell ourselves that we still have plenty of time, that we can learn tomorrow, and that is the problem with Alsace. According to M. Hamel, Hamel told them that this is the problem with Alsace. We always put things for tomorrow. We procrastinate. We put things off till tomorrow, and when reality strikes, there is no more tomorrow. There is no time left. He challenged them, saying that how could they call themselves Frenchmen and not know how to speak French? Hamel blamed every individual for the problem of not learning on time. Parents prefer their children to work in the farm or at the mill to earn a little extra money and kept their learning aside. He also blames himself for sending the students to water the flowers in his garden instead of learning inside the classroom. He also gave them a holiday whenever he wanted to go fishing. And even the students themselves neglected their studies when they had time. Hamel went on to say that the French language was the most beautiful and the clearest and the most logical language in the world. He urged that though they had to live under rule of the Prussians, they should never forget their language, because their language is their identity, and as long as they held on to their language, it was like they had the key to their prison. Hamel taught a grammar lesson with as much patience and care that he could. Franz was very attentive and listened carefully, so he understood very well. After grammar, there was writing. Hamel gave them new copies that read France Alsace written on them in beautiful handwriting. Everyone started writing in pin-drop silence, that only the scratching of pens on papers could be heard, and the pigeons were heard cooing very low. Little Franz imagined that if the Germans came, would they force even the pigeons to coo and sing in German? Hamel sat silently in his chair and looked at everything as though he wanted to memorize or capture the images in his memory. He had lived there for 40 years and now he had to go. His garden was outside. The walnut tree had grown much taller. The vines that he had planted himself, and the desk and the benches were worn smooth by the coming of the many students and going away of different students. And now his sister was busily moving in the room above, packing their things. They were to leave the country the next day. After the writing class, they had a lesson in history, while the babies read out their ba, be, bi, bo, boo with old Holzer, who was also getting emotional. The clock struck 12 and they heard the Angelus in the church, and also the sound of the trumpets of the Prussians. Finally, Hamel stood up to say his final words. He said, "My friends, I... But he could not say anything else. So he took a chalk, turned to the blackboard and wrote "Vive la France" as big as he could. Then he leaned his head against the wall and, like a hopeless man in despair, and signaled with his hands that school is dismissed. You may go. That was the last lesson of the school in Alsace. And with that, we come to the end of the short explanatory video of the last lesson by Alphonse Daudet. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.